Frank Sinatra, the king of cool, hid a dark secret behind his dazzling blue eyes. This skinny kid from New Jersey became a global superstar. But behind the scenes, Sinatra lived a life that would shock you. It was a whirlwind of mob ties, presidential snubs, a son's kidnapping, devastating plane crashes, and a deep betrayal that forever fractured his closest friendship. His life was a roller coaster of fame, fortune, and heartbreak. And the real reason he never forgave his best friend is a story as captivating as any of his songs. Frank Sinatra's arrival in the world was far from smooth. Born with a lack of color and not breathing, the doctors pulled him out with tools. Thinking he wouldn't make it, they focused on his mom. But his grandma, Natalie Garaventa, wouldn't give up. Seeing a chance, she grabbed the newborn Sinatra and ran him to cold water. This surprise dip brought the young singer back to life, thanks to his fighting spirit and his grandma's quick thinking. This dramatic beginning left a permanent mark on his face, a reminder of his tough entrance into the world. But the physical challenges Sinatra faced went beyond the surface. A punctured eardrum, likely caused by the forceps delivery, left him with hearing problems throughout his life. A childhood surgery to address another issue left him with additional visible scars. As if that wasn't enough, his teenage years brought the added torment of severe acne, resulting in permanent pockmarks and scars. Schoolmates, oblivious to the struggles young Frank Sinatra was already facing, cruelly nicknamed him Scarface, fueling his anger and frustration. Frank Sinatra's heritage was rooted in Italy, with both his parents immigrating to the United States in their youth. His father, Martin Sinatra, pursued a career as a lightweight boxer, adopting the fighting name Marty O'Brien. Meanwhile, his mother, Dolly Sinatra, was a force to be reckoned with in the community. She was a woman of many talents, working as a midwife and actively championing local democratic causes. In fact, her dedication to women's suffrage was so strong that she even chained herself to City Hall in protest. The Sinatra family was not without its controversies, with rumors swirling about their alleged connections to the mob. During the Prohibition era, they owned and operated a bar, which would become a significant part of Sinatra's early life. It was within the walls of this family bar that young Frank Sinatra's passion for performing first ignited. He would climb atop the player piano, belting out tunes for the patrons in exchange for spare change. Sinatra's life on the rise took a dramatic turn during his singing gigs in New Jersey. He landed a sweet gig at a roadhouse in Englewood Cliffs, but trouble soon followed him like a catchy tune. Sinatra fell for a woman named Toni Della Penta, but there was a hidden melody in their love song. Della Penta was also seeing another woman, Nancy Barbato. This love triangle turned sour when the two women clashed, and Della Penta heartbreakingly suffered a miscarriage. Sinatra's next move was a shocker. After Della Penta confronted Barbato, Sinatra ditched Della Penta like yesterday's news, claiming he was only interested in Barbato. To add fuel to the fire, he even made up a story about Barbato being pregnant. Della Penta, furious and fuming, went to the police, accusing Sinatra of leading her on. To make matters worse, Della Penta ended up in jail herself after another fight with Barbato. But Sinatra was set on his new path. Later that year, he tied the knot with Nancy Barbato, the woman who stole his heart and possibly inspired a little white lie. The Frank Sinatra we picture today, the epitome of class, style, and suave, was a far cry from his initial public persona. In his early radio and movie days during the 1940s, he was known as a skinny, somewhat awkward teenager with a charming voice and a growing fan base. But the transformation into the iconic Sinatra we know today began in the early 1950s. It was then that Sinatra inked a deal with Capitol Records and joined forces with the legendary music arranger Nelson Riddle. Together, they crafted a new image for Sinatra, one that exuded sophistication, confidence, and timeless cool. This reinvention wasn't without its challenges. Sinatra once confessed to being afraid of only two people, his mother and Tommy Dorsey. Dorsey, a renowned band leader, had hired Sinatra in 1939, and Sinatra's career immediately took off. However, behind the scenes, tensions simmered. Sinatra clashed with drummer Buddy Rich, and even more troubling, he found himself trapped in a contract with Dorsey that severely limited his earning potential. This contract, which essentially gave away a large portion of Sinatra's future income in the entertainment industry, left him feeling stifled and exploited. Sinatra knew he had to make a bold move to break free from this oppressive situation. The deafening roar of his adoring fans became a symphony of empowerment for Sinatra. He recognized his immense popularity and felt confident enough to break free from the chains of his restrictive contract with Dorsey. With determination, Sinatra initiated a lawsuit to dissolve the unfair agreement that had been hindering his career. After a legal battle, Sinatra emerged victorious, but Dorsey's reaction was far from gracious. The band leader, feeling betrayed and resentful, resorted to publicly insulting Sinatra, a bitter feud that would continue until Dorsey's passing in 1956. However, there might have been a deeper reason for Dorsey's animosity. Dark whispers began to circulate, suggesting that Sinatra's departure from the band wasn't as simple as it seemed. Rumors hinted at a more sinister method, that Sinatra had enlisted the help of mob associates to intimidate Dorsey into releasing him from the contract for a mere few $1,000s. While the truth of these claims remains shrouded in mystery, such allegations of underworld connections would continue to cast a shadow over Sinatra's career. Sinatra's publicist, George Evans, saw a star in the making, but also a star in need of a boost. Evans devised a plan to amplify the young singer's appeal by holding auditions for the loudest screamers. He then strategically placed these girls in the audience to create a frenzy of excitement and adoration during Sinatra's performances. This orchestrated chaos was designed to generate buzz and hype as Sinatra embarked on his solo career. However, Sinatra's talent and charisma might have been enough on their own. His fan base was fiercely devoted, bordering on obsession. They would go to extreme lengths to get close to him, trying to break into his hotel rooms just to touch his bed, or even tear off his clothes. In a chilling incident, nearly 35,000 fans erupted into a riot when they couldn't get into an already packed venue where Sinatra was performing. The intensity of his fan base highlighted Sinatra's magnetic appeal, but it also underscored the darker side of fame. Throughout his life, Sinatra couldn't shake off the persistent rumors of his alleged connections to the mafia. The persistent whispers about Sinatra's mafia connections were fueled by more than just hearsay. Concrete evidence emerged in the form of photographs capturing Sinatra, posing alongside prominent figures of the Chicago Mafia. These visuals raised eyebrows and fueled speculation about the nature of their relationship. Sinatra's involvement went beyond mere photo ops. In 1948, he even lent his voice to the family wedding of Willie Moretti, a notorious member of the Genovese crime family. Perhaps this close association was the inspiration behind Sinatra's famous line calling Chicago, "my kind of town." Rumors swirled that Sinatra's ties to the mob extended beyond mere friendship. Some attributed his meteoric rise to fame and fortune to the influence and support of these powerful figures. The extent to which Sinatra benefited from these connections remains a subject of debate, but there's no denying that they would later cast a shadow over his career. Comedian Jackie Mason's experience added another layer to the intrigue. After making jokes about Sinatra in his act, Mason claimed to have been threatened and physically assaulted by gangsters in his hotel room. This incident further fueled suspicions of Sinatra's close ties to the underworld, suggesting that he might have used his influence to silence those who dared to mock him. The infamous mobster, Sam Giancana, added another piece to the puzzle. He was known to wear a sapphire friendship ring at all times, a gift purportedly given to him by none other than Frank Sinatra. This token of friendship served as a symbol of the intricate connections that bound Sinatra to the world of organized crime. The 1940s brought a whirlwind of emotions and events for Frank Sinatra and his wife Nancy. Their family grew with the children, and they made the exciting move from New Jersey to Hollywood. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic life, cracks began to appear in their relationship. Sinatra, unable to resist temptation, embarked on a series of affairs with various women. In 1945, he began a relationship with starlet and old friend Mary Maxwell, and in 1949, the tabloids caught him in a romantic getaway with the iconic Judy Garland. Sinatra's cheating ways hurt Nancy deeply. She tried to hold things together for a while, but eventually she couldn't take it anymore. On top of his marriage problems, Sinatra was also battling depression. He kept a happy face in public, but behind closed doors, his mood swings were wild and scary. Sometimes he even got violent. All this craziness only made things worse for Sinatra. The more he acted out, the more the press hounded him. It was a bad cycle that would soon explode in a terrible way, leaving a dark stain on Sinatra's life. His cheating, his mental health struggles, and his angry outbursts were a recipe for disaster. They threatened to ruin both his career and his personal life. It's said that Frank Sinatra fell head over heels for the movie star Ava Gardner the moment he saw her picture in a magazine. It was love at first sight for him. When they met, he was totally charmed, but she wasn't as into him at first. Eventually, though, she warmed up to his charms, and their love affair became the talk of the town. Sinatra was crazy about Ava, obsessed even. He knew he had to have her, no matter the consequences. By 1950, Sinatra and Nancy had been married for almost 10 years. They had 3 kids together and had been through a lot, especially with Sinatra's rise to fame. But when Sinatra confessed to Nancy about his affair with Ava Gardner, that was it for her. She kicked him out of the house and called a lawyer. They even announced their separation on Valentine's Day of all days. But with his divorce from Nancy underway, Sinatra was finally free to chase after his dream girl, Ava Gardner. It was a messy situation, but love can make people do crazy things, right? And for Sinatra, this was just the beginning of a wild ride. With his divorce from Nancy officially over, Sinatra finally got his wish and married Ava Gardner in a cozy, low-key ceremony in 1951. It was the start of his dream come true, but it turned out to be a real roller coaster ride, far from the happily ever after he'd imagined. Both Sinatra and Gardner loved to live it up. They were big on partying, gambling, and just having a wild time. But all that fun came with a fiery temper. They'd often get into huge fights, screaming matches that made headlines and shocked the public. It was a chaotic and passionate relationship, filled with both love and drama. Just when it seemed like they couldn't handle each other anymore, they surprised everyone by announcing their separation after less than 2 years of marriage. But their story was far from over, as they'd continue to dance in and out of each other's lives for years to come. After all the drama with Ava Gardner, Sinatra's career took a nosedive. He went from selling out huge venues to barely filling a small theater. Things got so bad financially that he had to beg 2 different record labels for a whopping $200,000 just to pay his taxes. One label said, "No way," while the other reluctantly gave him the money, but both ended up dropping him later on. One day in the early 1950s, when his career was in the dumps, Sinatra saw a bunch of young girls lining up to see Eddie Fisher, a hot new singer at the time, the Swan. This sight hit Sinatra hard, making him feel like nobody wanted him anymore. It was such a low point that he tried to end it all by sticking his head in the oven. Thankfully, his manager came to the rescue just in time, and saved his life. It was a dark and desperate moment for Sinatra, but it was also a turning point. Hitting rock bottom turned out to be a blessing in disguise for Sinatra. His role in the movie, From Here to Eternity, earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, catapulting him back into the spotlight. How he landed the part is still a bit of a mystery, though. Some say his ex-wife, Ava Gardner, pulled some strings for him, while others whisper that he used his connections with the mob to pressure the producers. Either way, it worked wonders for his career. From the mid-50s onwards, Sinatra was unstoppable. His albums flew off the shelves, his movies got rave reviews, and he was always hanging out with the coolest people in Hollywood, like the Rat Pack and other big-time celebrities. Life was a party for Sinatra. During this golden era, Sinatra met a stunning blonde who would become a major figure in his life, Marilyn Monroe. She was married to his buddy Joe DiMaggio, but their friendship quickly blossomed into something more complicated and intriguing. Sinatra's world was buzzing with excitement, and his relationship with Marilyn would only add to the drama and allure of his already legendary life. Even with all the fame and success, Sinatra's love life was still a whirlwind. He was linked to a number of beautiful women, including model Angie Dickinson and actress Juliette Prowse. It seems like he couldn't resist the allure of Hollywood. But Sinatra wasn't just about women and music. He was also a big player in the political scene, just like his mom had been. He was a die-hard Democrat and worked tirelessly to get votes for his favorite candidates. He was especially close with John F. Kennedy and campaigned hard for him. However, this friendship put Sinatra in a tricky spot. You see, the mob wasn't too happy about Sinatra's close relationship with the Kennedys. The Kennedys were cracking down on organized crime, which didn't sit well with Sinatra's underworld buddies. Despite the tension, Sinatra remained loyal to Kennedy until the president did something that really hurt him. Frank Sinatra was like John F. Kennedy's biggest cheerleader in Hollywood. He supported him loudly and proudly, even singing his heart out at Kennedy's big inauguration party. They were like two peas in a pod, or so it seemed. But then their friendship took a sudden nosedive in 1962. Kennedy was visiting California, and the plan was for him to stay at Sinatra's fancy house. But surprise! Kennedy decided to stay with singer Bing Crosby instead. Can you imagine how that must have felt? Sinatra was so offended, he basically went into Hulk mode and smashed the helipad he'd built just for Kennedy with a sledgehammer. It was like something out of a movie. The friendship never really recovered from that snub. It's crazy how quickly things can change, even for big stars and presidents. Even though Sinatra was no longer with Nancy, he was still a loving dad to their kids. But one night, he faced every parent's worst nightmare. It was December 8th, 1963, and his son, Frank Jr., was kidnapped from his hotel room in Tahoe. The kidnappers quickly called with their demands, a big pile of Sinatra's cash. They wanted $240,000, which would be like $2 million today. They also told Sinatra to only call them from payphones. Can you imagine the stress? Sinatra started carrying rolls of dimes around with him, just in case he needed to make a call. It became a lifelong habit for him. After 2 agonizing days, Frank Jr. was thankfully set free. But the ordeal left a lasting mark on Sinatra. The fear and worry he felt during those days never really went away. When Sinatra's son was kidnapped, things were already tough for the singer. He was busy filming a movie with his rat-packed buddies, and on top of that, he was still grieving the loss of President John F. Kennedy, who had been tragically assassinated just weeks before. It was a double whammy of stress and sadness. Sinatra and Kennedy hadn't been on the best terms lately, and now there was no chance for them to patch things up. The whole ordeal was so overwhelming that Sinatra even thought about quitting the movie altogether. Can you imagine how heartbroken and exhausted he must have been? But somehow, Sinatra found the strength to carry on. He eventually went back to filming, putting on a brave face for the cameras and his fellow actors. Sinatra, at the ripe age of 50, set the tabloids ablaze with his new flame. Actress Mia Farrow, who was just 21 years old at the time. Talk about a May-December romance. Sinatra, ever the controlling type, wanted Farrow all to himself and demanded she ditch her acting career. Surprisingly, she agreed, shocking everyone by leaving the hit soap opera Peyton Place right when she was becoming a star. From that point on, Farrow was known more for being Mrs. Sinatra than for her acting skills. But then, a golden opportunity knocked on her door. The lead role in the iconic horror film, Rosemary's Baby. Bored with her quiet life as a housewife, Farrow jumped at the chance to play the role of Rosemary Woodhouse. It was a decision that would change everything, not just for her career, but for her relationship with Sinatra, too. Things got heated when the filming for Rosemary's Baby went over schedule. You see, Sinatra had always wanted Farrow to be in his dream movie, The Detective. But with her other project taking longer than expected, Sinatra lost his cool. He replaced Farrow with Jacqueline Bisset in his movie, and in a shocking move, divorced her. Talk about a dramatic ending. But as they say, every cloud has a silver lining. After years of jumping from one intense relationship to another, Sinatra finally found lasting love with a woman named Barbara. They stayed together for 22 years, until Sinatra passed away. However, even though they made it work, their marriage wasn't always smooth sailing. They had their fair share of ups and downs, and Sinatra had a particularly tough time when his beloved mother passed away. In 1977, Sinatra was dazzling audiences at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. His mother, Dolly, was so proud of her son that she planned to catch one of his shows. Sadly, fate had other plans. Dolly was on her way to Vegas in a small plane when tragedy struck. The plane crashed into a California mountain, and there were no survivors. Sinatra was shattered by the news. It was a loss he never truly got over, a hole in his heart that never fully healed. What makes this story even more chilling is the strange coincidence. Dolly Sinatra's plane crash happened on the same mountain where Dean Martin's son, Dean Paul Martin, also lost his life in a similar accident just 10 years earlier. It's like a cruel twist of fate that connected these two families through unimaginable grief. Sinatra tried to be strong and carry on with his shows after his mother's passing. He even managed to perform 2 of them, but the pain was too much to bear. He eventually couldn't go on and canceled the rest of his shows at Caesar's Palace. As Sinatra entered his later years, his life story was like a juicy Hollywood movie, full of twists and turns, romance and drama. It's no wonder biographers were eager to write about him. But Sinatra wasn't thrilled about just anyone telling his story. There was one biographer, Kitty Kelly, who had a reputation for digging up all the dirty secrets of the rich and famous. When Kelly announced she was setting her sights on Sinatra, he was furious. He wanted to protect his image and his secrets, so he sued her for a whopping $2 million to try and stop her book. But it didn't work. Maybe Sinatra knew Kelly was going to spill the beans about his messy marriages, his love affairs, and his ties to the mob. Or maybe he just didn't want anyone else controlling his story. Whatever the reason, he eventually dropped the lawsuit. Kelly's book came out and became a huge hit. People couldn't get enough of the juicy details about Sinatra's life. But all the negative publicity took a toll on Sinatra's health. His daughter even blamed Kelly for many of the problems he faced in the 1980s. It just goes to show that even a legend like Sinatra couldn't escape the power of the pen. Despite the ups and downs, Sinatra's love for performing never faded. In 1987, he decided to get the Rat Pack back together for a reunion tour. However, things quickly went off the rails, turning into a total disaster behind the scenes. The relationships between the members were completely messed up. Sinatra, being Sinatra, refused to even talk to Sammy Davis Jr. because he was using drugs. Davis Jr. was also struggling with money problems, and claimed that Sinatra's team had promised him a fortune to join the tour. But instead, he watched helplessly as Sinatra's guys allegedly pocketed his hard-earned cash night after night. Just when the Rat Pack reunion seemed like a total mess, things took a somber turn. Sammy Davis Jr. was diagnosed with throat cancer in 1989. It was a heavy blow for everyone. As one leg of the tour wrapped up, Sinatra gifted Davis Jr. a golden watch as a token of appreciation for his presence and friendship. Tragically, not long after, Davis Jr. passed away, taking the cherished watch with him to his final resting place. It was a bittersweet end to their bond, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing the moments we have together. But the sadness didn't stop there. Dean Martin was also dealing with a heavy heart. His son had died in a plane crash just 9 months before the tour, and the accident happened on the same mountain where Sinatra's mother had perished years earlier. It was a haunting coincidence that seemed to weigh heavily on Martin's soul. Martin turned to alcohol and other substances to cope with his grief, but it only made things worse. From the very first shows, it was obvious that he wasn't himself. He was lost in his own world, barely going through the motions. At one point, he even threw a lit cigarette into the audience, showing just how much pain he was in. After only 5 shows, Martin couldn't handle it anymore and left the tour. This abrupt departure created a massive rift between him and Sinatra. It was a sad and final chapter in their friendship, as the two legends never spoke again. The Rat Pack reunion, once filled with hope and nostalgia, ended up being a painful reminder of loss, heartbreak, and the complexities of human relationships. Coming back from that chaotic tour, Sinatra's health went downhill fast. He became forgetful and confused, even messing up the words to his own songs during performances. It was clear that the legend wasn't as strong as he used to be. His last years were a real struggle. He battled heart problems, breathing troubles, pneumonia, dementia, and even bladder cancer. It was a lot for anyone to handle, let alone an aging icon like Sinatra. But through it all, his wife Barbara was his rock. She never left his side, offering love and support through every challenge. When Sinatra had a heart attack in May 1998, Barbara begged him to keep fighting. But the singer knew his time was coming. In a heartbreaking final whisper, he said, "I'm losing." And just like that, at 82 years old, the legendary Frank Sinatra took his final bow. It was the end of an era, the closing chapter of a life filled with music, passion, and drama. Sinatra's funeral was like a who's who of Hollywood. Family, friends, and a whole bunch of famous faces showed up to say goodbye to the legendary singer. It was a grand farewell fit for a king of entertainment. His family wanted to send him off with all his favorite things, so they tucked some cherry lifesavers, Tootsie Rolls, a bottle of Jack Daniels, a pack of Camels, a Zippo lighter, a dog biscuit, for his furry friends in the afterlife perhaps, and even a roll of dimes into his casket. It was a touching tribute to the man who lived life his way. But the story doesn't end with Sinatra's passing. In fact, it got even more interesting after he was gone. Turns out the FBI had been keeping tabs on him for a whopping 50 years. They were watching him because of his rumored mob connections and his close friendship with the Kennedy family. Over the years, they collected a mountain of information on Sinatra, filling up a massive 2,403-page file. Here's a twist you wouldn't expect. As Mia Farrow's son, Ronan, grew up, people started whispering that he might not be Woody Allen's son after all. Instead, they said, he could be the secret love child of Frank Sinatra. Now this is where things get juicy. Mia was with Woody Allen when Ronan was born, but some people, including Woody Mia and even Ronan himself, have hinted that Sinatra might be the real dad. It's like a real-life soap opera. If it's true, it might be good news for Ronan, who doesn't talk to Woody Allen anymore because of some serious accusations against him. But Sinatra's daughter, Nancy, doesn't believe it for a second. Still, you can't deny the resemblance between Ronan and Sinatra. They both have those piercing blue eyes and a certain charm about them. It's enough to make you wonder, right? So, the mystery of Ronan's paternity continues to swirl. It's just another chapter in the never-ending saga of Frank Sinatra, a man whose life was full of secrets, scandals, and surprises.